Chapter 5, Hope, British Columbia. When the bus entered British Columbia, I started to get ready for my next move. Either I arrive in Vancouver or not. Unpredictability was the thing I kept thinking all the time. I had to disembark from the bus soon, but when? And where? And with no money in my pocket? I felt I had to run to get away. What will be will be. All I needed was the right opportunity. The bus got closer and closer to Vancouver. The wild Rocky Mountains landscape became routinely boring already, and the next stop was in a small town called Hope, BC, about 3.5 hours bus drive from Vancouver. This was it. I took my Chimmy-Dan bag, got up from my seat, and as the bus stopped for refreshments, I walked to the door, and got down from the bus. On my way from my seat to the door, I passed through the young couple, who were with me all the time. From the corner of my eyes, I saw the woman grabbing the hand of her man, who was not paying attention. She drew his attention to watch me leaving the bus with my Chimmy-Dan bag. They kept staring at me in disbelief. It was a total surprise for them. They were positive I was going to make it all the way to Vancouver, aside from the fact that this was a small town in the middle of nowhere. The astonishment in their faces didn't fade even when I took the last look at them, right before I stepped down from the bus. It was a small town with one main street. I walked to the first coffee shop in sight, and entered. It was about 2 blocks away from the bus station. As I sat down at a table, facing the entrance of the coffee shop, I anticipated someone from the passengers to follow me. I was not sure whether the young couple will simply come after me. This seemed too awkward. I ordered coffee and waited. The stop was not going to be long, as the driver announced, when we entered the town. I was waiting to see the bus leave town. I could see, from where I sat, the entrance to the station, and the bus had to be in my view when it left. As I was drinking my coffee and looking to see the bus leaving, a man with long curly hair, a pair of sunglasses, dressed in very unofficial clothes, came and stood right in front of the coffee shop, and stared at me, while leaking ice cream. I recognized him immediately. He was one of the passengers in the bus who sat in a front seat, near the driver. He took a quick look at me and went away. This was it, I thought. From the expression he had in his face when he looked at me and saw me sitting there, I realized he was not very confident. The surprise they suddenly had to deal with probably put them in some kind of unexpected pressure. They could not just stop me, even if they were the Canadian Secret Service, as I found out later. After about 2 minutes, the man came back to the front of the coffee shop, where I was sitting. He had a cone of ice cream and was leaking it enthusiastically, as he made an effort to catch a better look at me through the front window near the cafe entrance. Behind him I saw the bus coming out of the station and heading outside town to the west. As the man kept looking at me and leaking his ice cream, I suddenly felt I took the initiative here, and I simply caught them unprepared. The man took off a moment later, and this was the last time I saw him. I finished my coffee quickly, paid, and went rushing outside. I looked left and right. There was no sign of him in sight. I had to think fast. First, I had to leave this town. With no more than $70 in my pocket, there wasn't much I could do. I entered the first place that could offer me immediate information about where I actually was. It was a motel in the center of the main road. I entered through the glass-colored doors into a small lobby, with a counter for the receptionist. There was no one in the reception. I rang the bell and a low male voice answered from somewhere inside. After a few seconds, a heavy-set young fellow came to the desk and greeted me. "Hello. I am looking for a map of the area here. Do you guys happen to have one?" "Yes, sure. Here it is. It's the map of British Columbia, costs $2. I took out $2 and paid, and he handed me the map. "Do you have any idea where I could park outside, sort of camping outdoors, in the vicinity?" I asked the young guy. "Well, let's see, you could go to this park." He took the map I just opened a moment before, and showed me a small spot on the map. "And where are we, sir? Can you show me where we are on the map?" He showed me the town. The park he pointed at was about 25 to 30 miles away. It's a resort park, very nice this time of the year. There is a small lodging facility on the premises, and a river you can fish in, I recommend it, he said and gave me back the map. Can you ask a taxi cab station if they have a taxi for me, to go out of town to that park? And also ask how much it would cost. Oh, sure, he said in complete enthusiasm, no problem. He took the phone and dialed the local taxi station. He spoke with the man on the other side of the line for a minute, and as he held the receiver turned to me and said, "It will be $68. No, that is too much, tell him if they are ready to take me there for 50. He got back on the phone and a second later turned back to me and said, "Okay, a taxi is on the way." I thanked the guy and went outside. I looked again for my companion and couldn't see him around. I waited for the taxi outside the motel, and after a minute or so it showed up. I jumped into it and asked the driver to stop at the next convenience store for some groceries I wanted to take with me. He stopped around the block. I jumped out and quickly grabbed a loaf of sliced bread, a 2-liter bottle of Coke and 2 cans of sardines. I paid and rushed outside to the waiting taxi. I didn't know where I was going to, but it sure felt good to be absolutely on my own, without the feeling of someone on top of me all the time. The taxi rushed out the small town. It was already late afternoon. The trip to the park took about 20 minutes. He stopped next to a few small one-room bungalows. I paid the driver and he left. No one can find me here, I thought to myself when I got out to the deserted park. I found myself completely alone on the premises. I started to walk toward a nearby, thick pine tree plantation on a small hill. I could hear the roar of rushing water of a river, that ran somewhere in a short distance, inside the plantation. The place was completely deserted. Here and there I saw a couple of people, walking with video camera into the plantation, next the river. The bungalows were unoccupied, it seemed there was no one there since last summer. I started to walk in the direction of the river. The weather was very nice, not cold, mild and appropriate for early May. It was already 4 in the afternoon. I was thinking about finding a quiet spot to spend the night at. I had no blanket or a sheet for cover, but I was ready to compromise the inconvenience, for the great feeling of freedom I had. I reached the river. It ran inside the plantation. It was not very far from the parking lot, where I saw the accommodation buildings, near a main road that ran by the park. The water of the river flew violently from the east, coming from a sharp curve that was only partly visible from where I stood. It was not a large river, but the water flow made a noisy roar which could be heard in a distance. I found a flat area covered with soft grass, right next to the river's bank. I laid down the chimmy-dan bag, checked around, and sat down on the grass. The sound of the flowing water in the river became more and more part of the place, and very soon it became unnoticeable. I looked around me. There were only trees that stood firmly on the hillsides. The entire landscape of the place was dominated by mountains, and the river ran around them like a white foamy strap of fluid, running among green patches of land. I didn't hear birds. The noise of the river was strong enough to obscure all other noises. I opened the bottle of Coke I had, and took a long sip. The refreshing taste of it gave me back the feeling of reviving freedom I was so longing for. I didn't think of anything else, other than the fact no one could ever find me here, as long as I stayed here. When the night started to fall, I already had a short nap and I was ready to pass the night there. I didn't care about anything. Nothing could be more dangerous than the human beasts that were after me. So, I felt somewhat secure as I fell asleep a few hours later. I covered myself with the large towel I had and the soft grass I was laying on, made a comfortable bed. I woke up a few times during night, each time the noise of the river was loud enough to give me some secure feeling I needed in this situation. Morning finally came and the chills of dawn kept me awake as the sun rose above the mountain's peaks. I got up on my feet and went to the bank of the river to refresh my face. The water was very clear and chilly. I washed my face and thought about taking a dip in the river. Medicine Hat, Alberta. The cold temperature of the water made me give up the idea of taking a dip. As the day started, I had to find a quick answer to what's next. I thought about staying there for a few days, but I was not equipped for it, and it could be dangerous with the bears that probably were in the area in large numbers. I went to the other side of the river. By crossing a small wooden bridge, I walked deep into the thick forest, and the feeling of loneliness, and being so remote from anywhere, was the thing that finally helped me come to a decision. I couldn't stay there one more day. I turned around and headed back to the parking lot, into the park entrance. I walked to the main road that ran nearby, and tried to hitchhike. Traffic was next to none, on this area. There wasn't much I could hope for, at the time of the day in such a remote place. Every now and then a large 18-wheeler passed on the long curving asphalt road, that ran among the bushy mountains in the vicinity. After about 2 hours on the road waiting for someone to pick me up, a large truck managed to slow down for me. I had to run about 100 yards to catch it, as the driver was waving his hand through the window trying to make a sign for me to hurry up. I caught up with him and climbed to the passenger side truck. I had to catch up my breath, thank the guy who seemed glad to have a companion for the road. My final stop is Medicine Hat, it's about 2 hours from now, that's all I can offer you. The driver said, as the huge truck climbed slowly back on the road. With the noisy engine and while shifting gears, he managed to say his words. "That'll be just fine, thanks a lot," I yelled. "Where are you heading?" "East, I came all the way from Montreal by bus, I have to go back." "That's quite a distance you have in front of you." "Yes, I know. I hope I will make it. I don't care to see the country meanwhile." "Cigarette?" "Yes, thank you." We kept on talking all the way to Medicine Hat. It's a small town in the most southeastern tip of Alberta. The truck was going along the road situated right between two ridges of the Rocky Mountains, in a valley which stretched to the east downhill. The ride to Medicine Hat took about 2.5 hours. We entered the city in a noisy slow motion of the huge truck. I thanked the guy very much and got off in the main street of the town. I didn't have much money on me, but the little I had was enough for the coffee I needed so much. I entered a coffee shop and sat next to the counter. I had 2 cups of hot black filter coffee, which refreshed me and gave me some new energy to go on. I had to think again about what I was going to do. I wanted very much to cross the border to the US. The border ran right along the path I took back to the east. It seemed dangerous to do. I didn't know the area very well, and decided to keep heading back east, until a good opportunity will come, so I will be able to sneak the border to the US. If this will happen soon, there is no chance for the people who were looking for me to ever find me. In the US, the entire situation will be completely different for me. I thought I will be more secure in the US. I headed to the main road toward the eastern exit from the city. In a rather large road intersection, just outside the city, I stood on the east side of the main highway, and waited for a lift with one of the many cars and trucks that passed by. I made a sign from a piece of brown paper that had the word East in large black letters. I held it up to the passing traffic. I didn't wait too long when a pickup truck which had a towed cart attached to it on the back stopped next to where I stood. I was glad someone stopped at all. As I jumped in, the young driver said, "I am going all the way to Sparwood, that's about 6.5 hours from here." "That will be great, I thank you very much." We took off in a rush. I pulled out the map and quickly revealed where Sparwood was. It's a small town 18 miles west of the state line, between Alberta and British Columbia, in the heart of the southeastern ridge of the Rocky Mountains. The U.S. border line runs a short distance south from the city. This will put me in a good place to keep on to the east. I was going aimlessly back east, and the chance to cross the border to the U.S. would probably come soon, so I thought. The road to Sparwood was fascinating. As we crossed the ridge of the Rocky Mountains, we had to climb to the peak of a mountain on the way, and go down from it later. The wild landscape of wooded mountains, everywhere in sight, kept astonishing me again and again. We kept riding smoothly on the long highway. It was already dark outside when the pickup truck entered Sparwood. I was exhausted, and ready to pass the night somewhere in the city, until I decide what to do next. I thanked the guy who helped me to get all the way here, and went on to the main road of the small town. It was 9 o'clock Friday night. The entire town seemed off for the weekend, and only here and there I could see some movement of people in the deserted streets. I looked around and couldn't see any place I could stay for the time being. I went to a nearby motel and entered the main lobby. Two young attractive girls were sitting behind the counter chatting in low voices. "I need to get to the bus station, can you tell me where it is?" I asked. "Yes, but I don't think you are going to catch any bus now, sir," one of them answered me. "When do you think could be the next bus going east?" "Sometime tomorrow morning. Would you like to spend the night here meanwhile?" "No thanks," I said. "Could you just show me where the bus station is?" "Yes, sure. You get out from here, turn right, walk 2 blocks down the main road, and you'll see a big blue sign on the right side of the road." "I appreciate it very much, ladies. Take care." I went outside and started heading in the direction they told me. Soon I found myself in front of the bus station. It was closed, and only a timetable hanged on the front glass, showing the times and destinations of buses. I checked carefully and saw that the next bus to go anywhere east from here will enter the station the next morning at 3 o'clock. This was a few hours away. I found a small door with a few stairs in front of it, in the corner of the building, and sat on a step. It started to get cold. I took out the training suit I had in my bag, and put it on. I had to wait 6 or 7 hours for the bus to arrive. I took out everything in my pockets, and found the last $20 I had. That's it, $20. How far can a $20 ticket get me? I wondered. I sat there on the steps, in the middle of the main street of Sparwood, BC, and waited for time to pass. It became chilly, and I started to shiver from loneliness and cold. I fell asleep for a short period, woke up and fell asleep again a few times on and off. A nearby disco attracted people of late hours. Late into the night, as the hours passed, the place started to become more and more alive. At about midnight, a group of young boys and girls happened to pass right by me. One of the girls saw me, looked in astonishment and asked me, "What are you doing here?" "Waiting for the bus," I answered quickly. "Now?" "Yes, it's supposed to show up at 3 o'clock, I hope it will not be late," I answered her, and wished she would split from her friends and stay with me. It was an illusion I had, but they kept walking past me, and the girl kept looking backwards behind her shoulders to my direction, and just kept walking. Deep inside me I felt like joining these bunch of youngsters and be part of them. I fell asleep moments later, as it became even colder and I was shivering more and more. 3 o'clock came at last. I was ready for the bus to show up, and indeed, it showed up a few minutes after 3 o'clock. The driver came down and took off a few pieces of baggage from the side trunk of the bus for the 2 passengers who came down. Another 2 to 3 passengers also waited for the bus with me. They all handed the driver the tickets they already had, and got on. "How far east can I get with $20? I asked the driver. "Well, let's see, where do you need to go?" "I am on my way to Montreal, and that's all I've got for now," I said in an apologizing tone. "I don't know, I'll tell you what, get on the bus, I'll take the $20 from you, and as soon as we get to Brandon, I'll tell you how far you can keep going. The ticket to Brandon is $11.75. "All right," I said and gave him the $20 bill. I got on the bus and found an empty seat on the front part of it. It was going to be 3 hours' ride. The warmth of the couch I sat on came right on time for a good nap. I slept for the entire way to Brandon and woke up as the bus entered the city. It was already almost 6 o'clock in the morning, the sun was up and full daylight was already on. Brandon was going to be a place I will never forget.